no one really wants to go to the gym except for the rare few, right? But if you build the muscle of writing and it's built into your schedule, it's built into your calendar, it will get easier every single time you do it, and your body will snap into shape. The same way that, when you sit down on the couch, your hand might just go to the remote and turn on the TV before you realize it. The same thing where if you create that routine, you sit in front of your computer, your fingers are going to start typing.
Do you love science fiction and fantasy books? You found yourself in the right dimension. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse, where each week I talk to science fiction and fantasy authors about myth, magic, and the infinite possibilities of storytelling. I'm your host, Herman Stuernagel, and I will be taking you on a journey with some of your favorite authors, helping you to get to know them and possibly uncover some new literary gems along the way. Ready to explore? Because on this show, every conversation is a doorway into a different world. So welcome once again to the greatest podcast in the multiverse. I am super excited today. I've got a very special guest and fellow Canadian, Sam Paisley. Welcome here.
Hello. Welcome everyone out there in the podcast verse.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I'm always happy to have fellow Canadian authors on. It seems like there's a lot of us though.
We're a growing tribe, that's for sure.
Yeah, I feel like, a lot of the guests I do get on happen to be Canadian, which is great because it's nice to let people know that we're out here.
Yeah.
So Sam, why don't you just start us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing journey up until this point.
Sure. So my name is Sam, as you've mentioned. I am the author of the Elements of Time series, which is right here. Book 1 is out. It's been out almost a year. And there's some stuff coming up. It's a series, so there's some more coming down the way. I'm from Toronto. It's where I live with my family, my wonderful wife. And my writing journey is a pretty standard one. I just, love stories. I've always been enamored by them, and I decided about a decade ago, almost exactly a decade ago, that I wanted to write a book, and it took barely 9 years and 7 drafts and 1.5 million words, but eventually you get it done. So spent basically all of my 20s learning how to write and writing as much as I possibly could to develop my skill set, and it eventually popped out what I like to think is a relatively good book, at least.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that is quite the journey to get to where you are. A couple things I want to pull out there. So you started what eventually became this book. You started that 9 years?
Yes,
ago?
I started at end of 2014. So
wow.
Almost 10 full years now since I started.
Yeah, wow. And we'll dig into that a little bit more, but I do want to know, was that the first thing you tried to write?
Yeah, on a grand scale. I wasn't one of those people. I wish I was. I'll preface this by saying I wish I had put the practice in before, but I wasn't one of those kids who grew up and had a whole bunch of novel drafts sitting, on my computer somewhere. So I drafted this book from start to finish. Sorry, not from start to finish, but several drafts, at least 3 or 4 drafts from start to finish, completely, and then tossed them. So this was really a project that I dove in on. And, I say this on a lot of interviews I'm in, but maybe one day if I become like the next J.K. Rowling or Tolkien or something, or, make it big, I'll release that first ever draft, which was written in about a month, 300 pages, single spaced. It's the worst garbage anyone's ever laid eyes on. So, just dove in with what ended up being a concept so much bigger than I ever intended. Book 1 is 235,000 words.
Wow.
This is draft 7. Draft 6 was 265K. And my editor was like, look, I'm not going to tell you what to cut, but you should probably look to cut. So I just went in and slashed out like 15% of it. But yeah, I just dove in and didn't realize kind of what I was jumping into, and that's
right.
Part of the reason it took so long.
Wow. Well, I think you said you didn't do the work to get to there, but I think you did do the work. You didn't write 10 separate novels, but I think writing the same novel 10 times definitely counts.
Yeah.
Now, so I guess so this was what made you decide when you first sat down to write this. What made do you think I'm going to write this book?
Yeah, a couple things. So the shortest answer was that I had a creative itch, and I was coming fresh out of university, and I was considering if I wanted to go into a career in film, possibly, or something creative, or something more business minded and stable, and make money and support myself, and not be a starving artist. And I decided the path of stability. But and then in my rational mind was like saying, okay, the lowest barrier to entry is writing a book, right? You can write a movie script. It could be the best. It could be the next Star Wars, but the odds of that being turned into anything is very low. So
Yeah, right.
the rational, simple explanation is that writing is a low barrier to entry media, I guess, or medium. And it wasn't something that I was practiced in, so that's why, again, all the reps. But the long answer of where the passion came from, and what kind of got me, for lack of a better term, obsessed with writing, essentially was I wanted to create a story. I grew up on stories. I grew up watching, Saturday morning cartoons, which doesn't sound like it's that based in storytelling, but the stuff we're talking Metabots, Digimon seasons 1 and 2, Avatar, even some seasons of Power Rangers, all of these different shows that had really great arcs.
Right.
And grew up watching Star Wars and Back to the Future and Terminator and all of these,
Nice.
playing JRPGs and all of these games and movies and books and TV shows that were incredibly story based. And I wanted to make something and build something that I could give back. That was a world that people could live in and enjoy and love, like the ones that I did. So that was the passion. And then those things kind of married up together and took over my entire 20s.
Right. Yeah. And so what made you decide, so you had this idea for a story, you wrote it down, and then you got to the end of that first draft, and what kind of was the process from there? What did that look like? And this is just such a unique process to almost anyone else I've talked to. So I'm really interested in the, I guess the flow of how this worked. You got to the end of that first draft. What happened from there?
Yeah. So basically I finished it in like a month, and I was, I don't know, 22, and idiots just had no idea what he was doing. But I'm standing there like I'm like walking around like this, like I've mastered the art of storytelling already. And so I basically signed up at the University of Toronto for like a master's level writing course, right? It was like for novel writing and whatever, one of those courses, like an adult learning type course.
Right.
So I go in, and it was very, very workshop based. And I kind of skipped the prelude courses that were recommended before, like writing short stories and whatever. And I was like, I don't need that. I just wrote a whole book. Right. And I just instantly realized, I am not even remotely as talented as anyone else in the room. So we're, giving each other 20,000 word excerpts as the assignments every week, and we read and critique everyone's. You didn't have to write 20,000 words every week. It was everyone.
Right.
You change every week. That'd be crazy. But,
yeah.
and just the honest feedback from people whose writing I could see was insanely better than mine really just instantly put me back in my place and had me learn, okay, I have a lot of learning to do. I got a road ahead of me. Right. And then it was basically a process of years of writing and drafting and rewriting and giving it to people. And a lot of people from that class, we became friends and became a writers group. And so writing it, giving it to people, getting feedback, and basically just the process of receiving feedback over years and refining and reading and watching as many, different voices on YouTube, which is just a free learning resource basically, on writing, and reading books on writing, and reading other books and novels in general. And so just absorbing as much as I could of the craft, and iterating that basically 6-7 times for a full novel, and during that process also figuring out my writing style and my writing habits. So I realized I was better writing fall through spring because of the seasons, and you're in Canada, so like we're going to be inside anyways, so we might as well take advantage of it. and how to discipline myself and set specific days for writing and write outlines. And I thought I was someone who could just dive in and write a whole story. I mean, I wrote a book in a month, and it was terrible. And I realized that my process of discovering my own world is through writing. Which is part of the reason it took so long, is because I would write like an entire draft of a book and be like, okay, I like these elements, but everything else can go. It's a long process to do that. So learning how to plan out chapters so I can understand what I'm even trying to accomplish and take bits and pieces and not fully invest, but brainstorm in advance. And so
Right.
A very, very iterative process of trial and error and learning. And I like to think I've developed a foundational set of skills from it. So moving forward, nice. The next book might only take 8 years, and then 7 and then 6. So, right. Yeah, very iterative process to learn.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess, and that is a great segue. We'll jump between some of the questions here that
sure.
Sent, but so what have you learned through that process? Because I know your next book isn't going to be 8 years.
No.
What did you take from that the last decade of learning, essentially, that you're able now to bring to your next book and say, okay, I have a better sense of how to do this now?
So the biggest thing I learned was I need not even a roadmap. I need like a 4K ultra high def step-by-step instruction of exactly how I'm getting there, particularly because the scope and scale of a book like this and a series like this is there's a lot of moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So for book 2, I'll give you an example. Book 2, I've got a 13,000 word outline, and it's outlined approximately a third of the actual plot.
Okay.
So the outline is going to be about 40,000 words, which is the size of like a
novel to some people.
Yeah, not so long
like
novel.
Yeah.
And what that'll allow me to do basically is a couple things. So what I need for books of this scale, right? If I'm writing maybe something that's, again, 40, 50, 100K, it might be different. But for this series, I'm still discovering the world. Like, it's extremely planned out and meticulous, but there are still things when you write, when you surprise yourself and be like, I didn't even think of that until now. Mm-hmm. And so what I've been doing with the outline is basically been plotting chapter by chapter. And my chapters are split thematically. So, like, it'll be often multiple different points of view. So, like, main character, side character, different main character, original main character, all in the same chapter. But they're all connected, usually with a single theme, and then typically time-bound, so things are happening at the same time. And so plotting out what happens in each of those POVs, just to say to myself, okay, character X is doing this, and they go here, and they go here, and then maybe this thing happens, and don't forget this other thing you mentioned, blah, 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 and jotting that out, so that basically by the end of it, I've got like the novel written in point form notes, broken down into chapters, and I know exactly where I'm going.
Right. So you're breaking that down point form. Then it's not like you're going in because, and I am curious about this because I'm kind of doing somewhat of a similar process in this book that I'm working on now, where I'm trying to do a skinny draft essentially, and where I'm not, because I'm really bad at outlining. But I know that outlining is a way to write quicker. So for me, what I'm trying to do, I get stuck doing the point form. So I'm trying to go in and write kind of just a short piece of the chapter and then move on to figure. And then if it doesn't fit, I can go back and rewrite this 300 words. It's not a big deal, rather than rewriting it, 3,000 to 8,000 words that didn't fit. Right. So, but what you're doing is you're actually writing a point form outline for each chapter and breaking out where things go, I guess, for each chapter along the way.
Yeah, exactly. A skinny draft is a good way to look at it. And frankly, like 40,000 words on a 250K word book is a skinny draft. It's all proportional.
Yeah.
And what I'm attempting to do, right? This is all still trial and error, but what I'm attempting to do for book 2 is set the like if you look at a book almost like from the technical and the artistic standpoint, is set the technical blueprint out in extremely fine
Okay.
detail with
Mhm.
obviously things can move and shift and you can come up with something new, and then the artistic overlay to like that's where the beautiful prose comes in and the symphonic dialogue that speaks to multiple themes at once and all that kind of stuff. And that to me is much easier to do once I already know the skeleton of the body.
Yeah, right.
Um, and so that's my plan, is to try to separate those two things as much as possible, because it's very fun to write nice, pretty, flowery words and descriptions and fight scenes and cool magic.
Hmm.
But to your point, if you write 5,000 words of an awesome fight scene that's completely irrelevant, then you kind of just wasted
Yeah.
a day.
Yeah, for sure, right? Yeah, and that's where, like, I think, like, with my process, it's not, I have a much harder time. And I mean, I'm 10 books in now, so like I'm kind of learning where I struggle with some of these things is that, I struggle with with the technical pieces of an outline without the prose behind it, because I need I need the characters to kind of take over a little bit. And so what I am trying to do is, just let them do it, but not as much. Like, just like, okay, here's the base of what needs to happen. I don't need this full conversation yet. Like, I'll put a note. They talk about this and then move on, right? What you're doing sounds actually a lot like Christopher Rocchio was talking to me about what he does, because he writes insane outlines as well. I think he said he had a 40,000 word outline for his as well. So that's pretty cool, and I like that you've um, refined your process to get to that point, to find something that is going to work for you going forward.
I hope it's gonna work for me. We'll see. When
Yeah.
book two comes out, we can do a post mortem on the process.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you took that master's course. Did you take it? Did you go to school for English or writing or anything like that in addition to that?
No, so my undergrad was in business, and
Okay.
then I hated it. And I'm unfortunately, like, my personality is contrarian. So if you put me with like a bunch of business people, I'm just like, ugh, no one here has any passion for anything. And then if you put me with a bunch of like artistic people, I'm like, oh my god, can people just organize themselves? So I'm never happy. But I went to business school, and basically all my electives were in drama, English, film, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So nurtured that passion there, and like a lot of extracurriculars in that area. But then really, so I took some other writing classes as well. I took some comedy writing classes because I
Oh, nice.
wanted to do sketch comedy on YouTube stuff or whatever, and took not really focused around novel writing. It was mostly kind of the school of hard knocks slash the school of banging my head against the table. But um, again, I think that in today's, with the technology that we have today, like you could get an easily a university level education from YouTube for free,
Right.
if you find the right things to watch and things to listen to.
Yeah.
Um, and then in the book recommendations, it's like, oh, this person's got really good ideas. Are they citing anyone? Oh, they're citing John Truby. Let me read that book. Or Joseph Campbell. Let me read that book. So it was a lot of it's autodidactism or whatever it's called. But
Mhm.
yeah, just a couple kind of no formal schooling. Although a lot of my friends from that first writing course did go off to do MFAs in, like, I think the University of Reno and Scotland and Dublin. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
um, I don't know if they would say that it's worth it, but I don't want to I don't want to speak for them.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm mostly curious, but yeah, you're completely right. Like, I mean, I did have a bachelor of English degree, but when I came back into writing, I mean, Brandon Sanderson's BYU lectures that are free on YouTube
Watched all of those, yeah.
yeah. I mean, those are incredible for anyone who is, I mean, thinking of writing or just getting into writing, or even just wanting to refresh themselves, especially on fantasy and sci-fi writing. He provides and there's like 3 different years that he taught it on YouTube as well. So you get you're able to take it from different perspectives. Super, a super class to set on and learn from, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Now, tell us. I want to know a little bit more about the Elements of Time. What's it all about, and just give us, I guess, an overview of the book.
Yeah, for sure. So the tagline I usually go by is it's Avatar: The Last Airbender meets Star Wars with some supernatural and Stargate SG-1 thrown in. Um, and the kind of broader, so I really 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 wanted to write, so this is not what I recommend for any new writer. It's part of the reason it took me 10 years. I wanted to write a story with an elemental magic system. I've been obsessed with the Greek elements as a magic system since I was like a toddler. I don't know why. But that, so Avatar: The Last Airbender obviously really spoke to me.
Right.
And then I had this idea for like the end of book one, and I wanted it to be a trilogy because my stupid brain was like Back to the Future, Star Wars, other
Hmm.
such and I'm like, yes, it has to. So again, these are not don't just arbitrarily pick things to put in your story, but so I knew I wanted to be a trilogy, and I had this idea for how I wanted book one to end, and then I just kind of started blasting away. And the process of iterating so many times was a lot of the process of me, again, figuring out the world, figuring out the magic system. Part of what I wanted to do was make it absolutely airtight. I realize I'm not answering your question directly, and
That's okay.
there's a bit of a reason. But the story itself, basically, it centers around the two main characters. So here, two main characters, and as you can see, fire, air. I'll let everyone else examine the cover for more. I don't want to spoil anything, but they're about to graduate high school, and they're kind of thrust into this essentially war between cosmic beings, and they don't know which side's up. They don't know who's a good guy. They don't know who's the bad guy, and so we're figuring out with that the story out with them as they are. And there's some dramatic irony, of course, where you get insights that they don't have. But really, what it is, it's the first of a trilogy. But book one has its own standalone story and conclusive ending, and you feel like it's a whole story and know that there's more. Um, and it's an action adventure buddy comedy, for lack of a better term, that has several overlapping magic systems. One is elemental magic, so air, fire, water, earth. One is, I guess you can call it like space time magic, but it kind of leans into the four elementals being kind of spatial, and then there's temporal stuff going on, and then there's another overlapping magic system with basically magical artifacts is the best way to describe it. I call them empathic objects, and it just is my excuse to have whatever weaponry I want within the world. And so you have, again, a lot of elements from, like I said, Avatar with the magic system, Star Wars with the magic system. But at its core, it's a story about these two best friends trying to understand what it means to grow up and what it means to take on responsibility and what their destiny is and who they want to become. And I tried to write it with a ton of heart and a ton of fun and a ton of comedy and a lot of gravitas and a lot of underlying themes that will sneak up on you if you're not paying attention, and something that you can reread and keep learning more about and find and discovering more about. So if you like any of those things, I think you'll like the story. I can dive more into the plot and all that kind of stuff, but I try to keep it, pretty high level.
Yeah, for sure, and that's fair. And yeah, I mean, it's a concept that I have been very ever since I saw your book come out last year. I mean, it's sitting on my Kindle, but you know how it goes. There's like 1,000 books you want to get to, but
Yeah.
it is definitely something that intrigues me. And what one of the main things that has intrigued me about it is your magic systems. So you've already said you kind of told us a little bit about them, but how did you come to this concept where you have not just the elemental magic system, which is pretty, I think, a pretty standard fantasy magic system, at least like in general. I don't know the specifics of yours, but you've added on top of that two other separate magic systems. I guess what was kind of your process in developing that, and how do they work within your world, without giving us spoilers?
Yeah. So the process was basically again, I had this idea of how I wanted book one to end, and anyone who's listening to this will understand why I'm being so secretive about it, because it kind of ruins the book if I just tell you the ending. But
Don't do that.
but part of what I wanted to do and I needed to do to make the book work, I guess, I need to do for a reader like me, because I just constantly pick at plot holes, is I needed the plot to be airtight. And in order for the plot to be airtight, the magic system had to be airtight. And there's so much cause and effect that happens in this world, and the decisions have to be are extremely thought out, that if I didn't have the magic system exactly where it is right now, then you would just kind of think of it a couple days after you finish reading it, and you're like, I feel like this could have been solved with XYZ. So the process was a lot of me thinking, okay, if this needs to happen, I know that X needs to happen. What are all the other, what's A through Y, or A through Z around it that needs to make sense? So the elemental magic system was the beginning. And then I knew that I wanted to have, this isn't much of a spoiler. So there's beings called the Keepers, and they're basically beings composed of time, let's say. And so all of a sudden there just became this obvious dichotomy between, okay, well, if there's beings of time and the elementals are physical elementals, then they're spatial. So there's a dichotomy there in terms of magic system, and how would that work against each other, and how would that work with the goals of all of the characters? And so things started webbing out from there. And then as well, again, I wanted everything to be absolutely airtight plot-wise. So it's like, okay, well, I want to have these cool, the obviously the most iconic sword in any cinema, or not cinema, in any media, is arguably the lightsaber. Maybe the Master Sword, maybe whatever, but you turn on the lightsaber, everyone's going to know what that is.
Yeah, right.
And I wanted my warriors to have similarly iconic weaponry, but that was also tailored to them, and tailored to who they are, and tailored to their personality traits and all that kind of stuff. And so I started developing that entire world of empathic weaponry, and all of a sudden, again, it through a lot of trial and error, it slotted itself into the elemental magic system, where one of the core underlying themes of the book is connection, right? Connection with the people that you love, connection with the magic system to a degree that I can give some spoilers on. And so connection with your weapon makes it stronger, and that, it's not really explained in this book, but relates directly into the magic system. So the process was iterative, and I keep saying that, but it is true. Once you do 8 drafts of something, you're kind of in it. But it was a process of basically really obsessing over what the plot holes could be, and finding a logical answer to that within the world that I'd already built, and then asking that same question until I got down to the bedrock and truly solved for it. So hopefully I did that.
Cool. I love, and one thing that you mentioned there was on the theme and how you worked the theme into everything. And I think, obviously writing as many iterations as you did enabled you to do that, but I really appreciate when an author does that, and you don't just have the surface level story, but you have themes that have worked into various levels of the world and of different elements of the book. So that's really cool.
Yeah, that was a major, like, I'll give you a quick example, but it was a major focus of mine for the reason of, like, I wanted to build something that would last, even if 1,000 people, it maxes out 1,000 people ever read my book, but it stays with all of them for a long time, then I've done my job. Nice. But I really, really tried as much as I could to put as much attention to details. The main characters right here, and if you look really closely, there are also animal companions that are built into the magic system. Are air and fire, and that's not an accident. So the main character here in many ways is like a Peter Pan type character, and so he's the element of air. And then this character is extremely passionate, so he's element of fire. But also symbolically, there's and this is not relevant to, like, it's not like one of them's evil, but there's a dichotomy between heaven and hell.
Okay.
And similarly, like with the symbol of the series, it's two spirals. The white one is air, the red one is fire, and then there's earth and water underneath that are straight lines. And again, you can see kind of like heaven looping underneath, hell there, as well as the actual, like, a straight line versus a squiggly line in terms of the derivation down towards the physical, right? Air being the most ephemeral, then fire, and then water, and then earth. Earth and water obviously being the actual substance of our planet, and whether you want to say biblically or metaphorically, like, we are made of clay, which is water and earth because it's physical. And so I try to really overlap a lot of those themes into the struggles of the characters and the personalities of the characters, and even with these two characters, like, something, again, John Truby talks about this in Anatomy of a Story, but taking the best element of a character, no pun intended, and using that as their weakness or their fatal flaw, right? So, like, what a character who's really, like, light and brings levity to a situation and is fun, how could that turn into a character flaw? And as someone who's super passionate and who cares deeply and who, all of that kind of stuff. So, and it's easier with that one to figure out how that turns into a character flaw. But, and so really building as tightly as possible the theme around every single element of what you see, around the magic system, around the plot itself. It was really important to me to get that right.
Cool. Yeah. That's great. You mentioned John Truby. I haven't read his books, but I've watched him talk a lot on various YouTube videos and that. And what a smart storyteller.
Yeah,
he knows his stuff. And for those that don't know him, he does consultation for movie plots.
I think so.
Like,
I think so.
That's kind of his role. Like some really major. If you kind of see his resume, it's just absolutely incredible. He knows his stuff. But that does inspire me to go and pick up that book and go through it.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So how do you keep track of everything? Please don't tell me it's all in your head, because you've been dwelling on it for 10 years. Do you keep track of it somewhere?
I tried using a couple tools throughout. So I tried using Campfire. I tried using Word documents. But I found the most effective tool for me is obsessing about it every single day for a decade. I wish I was more organized. The short answer is it is all in my head, and that's why I need to write out such detailed outlines, because I forget it. But basically, the tool is writing and discovering and then remembering, which is not a useful tool. So the plan, like the major plot points, like what happens in book 2 and what happens in book 3, they're so big that I'd need like a massive blow to the head to forget them.
Right.
But the small intricacies, basically it's the act of writing it down. And part of what's cool about my world is I'm planning on releasing a series of, you can call them novellas, but like companion books that will be like, I want to do an art book, I want to do an encyclopedia, I want to do lore books and similar to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the Zelda and Hyrule Historia and those books, which I think would be really cool, and also then helps me remember the nitty gritty details.
Yeah, right. It gives you an excuse to write them down.
Yeah, exactly. So like I want to have like an encyclopedia of like, here's all of the empathic objects that are listed throughout and how they were created or the purpose of them or whatever the case is. And again, like almost like a Silmarillion, but have that rich lore so that if people have questions, they can just keep getting answers for them.
That's really cool. And are there other indie authors that are doing that? Because I can't think of any.
I hope
not.
Of my head.
Not even, because you're basically publishing your story Bible, right? Like in that sense, like that, you're creating this really rich tapestry for your world, which that's a really incredible thing to do.
I hope so. I think it, like, for me, it's that's the type of stuff I like. Like, I'm a lore nerd. My wife and I we don't get into fights in it, but it's fun. Like, I've never read Harry Potter, but I know way more than most people who have been obsessed with it their whole lives, because like I just randomly will spend hours on what used to be Pottermore and just reading like, this is interesting wand lore, and I'm like,
That's funny. That's really interesting that you do that without having read the story. Have you seen the movies at least?
I have seen the movies.
Okay,
So
so it's not like it's not out of context.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Who is this Ron character everyone keeps referencing? No, but I actually, so when I was young, like all my teachers were like, "Oh, you should read Harry Potter because all the kids like it." And the contrarian child I was like, "I'm never going to read it in my life now."
That's
now that
funny.
yeah. So 8-year-old me is preventing current me from reading these books.
That's funny. Yeah, ironically, that I mean, my situation growing up was probably the opposite. I was told I shouldn't read it, so I did.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a little bit of rebellion in youth, right? That kind of steers you. Well, you're saying I'm supposed to. I'm not going to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why, yeah, parents have to like hide the books they want their kids to read, like just a little bit off the shelf, and be like, "Don't touch that Shakespeare. You'll learn naughty things."
Right. That's hilarious. I love that. So now, we didn't talk about this earlier, but who were some of your author inspirations then?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm far more of a book, like individual story junkie than I am like obviously Brandon Sanderson's the juggernaut, and he's written so many books that are like it's hard to believe that he's not a group of writers.
Right.
But for me, it's more like individual stories. So like, Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One. I really, really like Ready Player One. Armada was okay. Ready Player Two is, fine. But like Ready Player One was a big inspiration for me. The Never Ending Story is probably my favorite book of all time. I've got literally 2 copies. I've got one right here, and then you can't see it, but I've got like a special edition over there.
Nice.
And so that had a huge impact on me. I mean, obviously, it would be a crime not to include the Captain Underpants series. Everyone's biggest inspiration as a kid. But yeah, so like I don't have author. Besides saying Tolkien or Sanderson, who are ubiquitous. Really, a lot of the like it's individual stories, and then it's a lot of the authors that I was writing with, the people who I was working with, who they've written books that are unpublished and will probably never be published, that are some of the best stories I've ever read in my entire life.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
So, how about some of your what are some of your current reads that you're finding, I guess, maybe not direct inspiration from, but what are you reading currently that you're enjoying?
Yeah, so I'm the slowest reader ever. I've been reading Brian Wilson's The Forsaken Planet for like actually 8 months. And it's just been so busy.
It's
and
a big one.
Yeah, but I'm like, okay, let me get through 3 paragraphs today, and at least that's an accomplishment.
I hear you.
So, and then currently I'm in book 2 of Z.S. Diamante's Stone and Sky series. I'm listening to those on audiobook, and they're absolutely fantastic. I'm finding audiobook significantly easier for me these days, just as life gets busier. Yeah. So Stone and Sky is really good. It's very classic fantasy. The Forsaken Planet is also very good. It's science fantasy, which I love the blend. It's very reminiscent of something like Ender's Game, but like Stargate is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and I consider that science fantasy.
Yeah.
Particularly near the end, it's more fantasy than sci-fi. And what else? I'm currently listening through Elantris, but I'm finding it a slog.
Okay.
Like I don't. Okay. It seems like that's a very hit or miss book for a lot of people.
Yeah, I haven't read that one.
It's like I said with Sanderson. I mean, so the Skyward series I just finished and I loved.
Yeah, I love Skyward. Yeah.
The first book was, I think, some of the best sci-fi I've ever read. And then they kind of vary throughout the series in terms of quality, as anything would. Nothing's going to be your favorite.
Right.
But those books were really, really good. That was my most recent series that I finished, which is nice because there's obviously so many unfinished series. But the next series I'm planning on finishing is the Stone and Sky series by C.S. Diamante. I'm like hammering him for the third one almost daily to just be like, you can send it to me early. It's okay. I'll be
Well, hey, I mean, I've got
little plug
sitting here on my shelf. Little plug for
there you go.
For Zach there. Yeah, he's been on the show a couple of times here. I just got that from his Kickstarter campaign, so that's why I have a year copy. Yeah. So and you're probably waiting for the hardbacks. Is that the?
I'm waiting for the audiobook.
Oh, the audiobook. Gotcha. Yeah. I actually listened to that first book on audiobook, and that narrator is just incredible. Like he picked such a great voice for that story. So, but yeah, I haven't gotten to the second book yet myself, but we will. But I like it. Two of the books you mentioned have been guests on the podcast already, so it's great that I know you're part of the Break-ins group, and I know Brian and Zach both are as well. So it's great that you're helping each other out and reading each other's books. I like it.
Exactly.
Awesome. So what is next for you? I know you've got you talked a little bit about your plan for your encyclopedia and your different little projects there. Do you have anything else on the go?
Yeah. So actually, I don't think I've announced this yet. So it'll be a Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse exclusive. But I am planning on doing a Kickstarter myself later in the summer. So I'm going to be doing quite a few things within that Kickstarter, exclusive things. So I'm doing a re-release hardcover with exclusive art within the book itself, which is not in this book. So that'll be nice. And there are no other hardcovers. So it'll be like first edition, signed, all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
I also am working on a novella, so the first of that companion series. That'll be again exclusive for the Kickstarter hardback. All of that good stuff. Cool. And it'll be thankfully it was kind of a risk writing it because it's a style I've never done before. But the beta reader feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, which has been fantastic. But basically it'll be like a series of it's the lore of the world of Elements of Time told through a series of journal entries from a character who's died before the start of book one.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mix between story and world building told in this really unique way, Kickstarter exclusive, as well as an audiobook for the novella, and then some other a lot of these are stretch goals, but some other stretch goals in there as well. So the next big project is that's coming soon.
That's really cool. Now, and when do you have an approximate time when you want to launch the Kickstarter?
I'm hoping to have it no later than like mid-August.
Okay.
So
pretty quick here.
Yeah, I'm basically doing the final touches on the things that I can control beforehand, and then setting up the stretch goals so that if we break those barriers, I can get things out to people relatively quickly. I mean, you've done Kickstarters, you know how it works.
Right.
So, it's something I've been trying to plan all year, and this will likely be the only thing I'll be able to actually publish for 2024 while I'm still working on book 2. So I want to get it in people's hands. And it'll be a nice tie into the 1-year anniversary of book 1.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I mean, putting together a Kickstarter, as I'm sure you are discovering, is almost as much work as writing another book. It's wild.
Exactly.
One thing I was not expecting. So what made you decide to go the Kickstarter route with it?
Yeah, I think mostly just the ability to kind of control. So for something like an audiobook, especially for a book of my length, it's an incredibly expensive endeavor. And you don't want to necessarily jump into that unless you know that there's appeal and a want for it. And similar with other publishing, parts of the publishing, like even getting a cover design, like it's an expensive endeavor. And you, so for me, launching these things, like these are things I want to do and I want to give people desperately. Like I want to provide as much as I possibly can. But there has to be a demand for it. So Kickstarter is a good way, even to know like eventually I'll recoup my losses. Like it might not cover everything, but there's enough of a demand that I can actually provide this for people and do it at the highest possible quality that I can muster. And it doesn't mean that I have to rely on something like Amazon or whatever that's going to eat most of the revenue and then deliver a fine product, but not as good as the top quality that I'm hoping to deliver. So a little bit more control, a little bit, market evaluation, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think Kickstarter is a great way to achieve that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that and chatting with you a little bit more when that comes
Yeah,
comes to
absolutely.
fruition. Yeah, cool. Awesome. So do you have any advice for writers, maybe writers who are starting out, maybe they're where you were a few iterations into your book and are, wondering if this, is ever going to happen? Anything that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice I have is you have to be bad at something long enough before you're good at it. There's no shortcut way to get better at anything, whether it's learning an instrument or a sport or whatever. So whatever ability level you're at, just keep practicing. Like put the reps in, get feedback from people, take it as positively as you can. Like even if it's obviously if someone's just bullying you about your writing, that's not the best. But if people are reading your work and giving you honest feedback, take from it what you can, learn from it what you can, and just keep iterating and keep practicing. And just with anything else, it's really just about discipline. So finding whatever routine or form works for you. I find with a lot of writers, because we're a creative breed, sometimes that discipline is lacking. And this is true in all of life, but especially in writing. The thing that stopped the best writers I know from actually moving forward has been waiting for the motivation. So I'm not motivated to write today. I don't want to write today. 99 times out of 100, you're not going to want to write. That's not like no one
Yeah.
really wants to go to the gym except for the rare few, right? But if you build the muscle of writing, and to me, it really is a muscle of, okay, whatever, Wednesday nights, Friday nights, Saturday, from this time to this time, I'm writing. And it's built into your schedule, it's built into your calendar. It will get easier every single time you do it, and your body will snap into shape. The same way that, when you sit down on the couch, your hand might just go to the remote and turn on the TV before you realize it. The same thing where if you create that routine, you sit in front of your computer, your fingers are going to start typing. So that's the biggest piece of advice, is just discipline and keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Great advice for sure. And I always, I've had authors, author friends who are they're wondering, when things are going to hit. They have a few books out, and I always, one thing I have to remind myself all the time is that Brandon Sanderson's. It took him 10 novels before his first one got published.
Yeah.
So like he didn't. It's not like he struck gold on his first one, and Elantris didn't really. I mean, it did well, but like it wasn't his breakout novel even. So
Yeah.
this is a marathon, right? And to your point, like I was talking to Kate and Love about this a little bit. You got to do the hard days to get to the results you want to see, right? So
Totally.
putting in that consistent effort. Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Cool. So this is the greatest podcast in the multiverse. So that means it's time for my favorite question. And that is, can you tell me how in a parallel universe, another decision that you might have made may have affected another version of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's actually pretty easy for me. So in grade 9, this one teacher was like, "Oh, this Queen's Commerce, this business program, is the best program in the country. And I was like, done, decision for university made. I don't have to think about anything. And I think if I just gave a little bit of thought to that, my entire life would be different. Now, I should say, I'm going to preface my answer with, I'm extremely happy with my life. I have a wonderful wife and family, and I'm healthy, and a great, career and friends and all that kind of stuff. So,
right.
But I think that I would have been really well suited for a different type of post-secondary education, or maybe even just jumping into the workforce and spending those 4 years writing and learning on my own and building an income, or just looking for, like, I'm the type of person who really, really loves to absorb information. Like, I love to be taught information, and looking for, let's say, a university that was like truly focused on the Socratic method and learning for the sake of learning and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
because that's what informs my writing.
Okay.
And that's what, like, I have spent so long learning psychology and learning different threads of theology, and learning, politics and philosophy and all of these other things that have informed the themes I'm trying to, and the big questions I'm trying to answer. So that, a half a second worth of thought on what I wanted to do with my life probably would have made a difference.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I mean, it's those decisions that at the time probably didn't, I mean, in high school, you're thinking, yeah, whatever, that's the best. Yeah, I'll just do that. No big deal. And I mean, high school, it feels like that what comes after school, to me at least, felt like a completely different world. That wasn't something I was like, it's like, yeah, I'll just do this and stuff will happen. And I mean, it did, but you can't realize as a 15 or 16-year-old the implication that sort of decision is going to have on the next 60 years, or even you can't even conceptualize that amount of time, at that point in your life. Right. So yeah, but I like it. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Cool. So Sam, can you tell our listeners where they can find you and where the best place is for them to get copies of your books?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at Elements of Time Book. I'm on Twitter at something. Twitter is the worst. I can check. I think it's at S Paisley Author, but I'll link
it in the show notes. It's all good.
It is S Paisley Author. I could not remember. And I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect there for whatever reason as well, as Sam Paisley. But you can get my books, book one currently on Amazon. You can also get a signed paperback on elementsoftime.ca, and keep an eye out on any of my... you can also email me directly, like my contact information is there. And I'm hoping to launch the Kickstarter, like I said, hopefully within the next 6 weeks or so. And you'll be able to buy significantly more special versions of everything through that as well.
Very cool. We will keep our eye out for that. I'll link all that in the show notes. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse. As well, you can help support the show by supporting me on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can get early access to the show, as well as submit your questions for my upcoming guests. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.